Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mini Books Podcast with your host, Gloria and Rogan. And today we are excited to dive into Special Book with You. We picked this one because it has really important lessons to share, and we can't wait to talk about them. So let's get started.
Ever feel like you're stuck in a rut? Like you're capable of more, but something's holding you back?
Yeah.
Today, we're diving deep into the mind of David Goggins.
The ultra athlete.
Yeah, the ultra-athlete and former Navy SEAL who turned overcoming adversity into an art form. We'll unpack his book, Can't Hurt Me, and see how his incredible journey
And trust me, the word incredible doesn't even begin to cover it.
can help us unlock our own hidden potential.
And Goggins' story is anything but your typical self-improvement narrative. It's raw, it's gritty, and it forces you to confront some uncomfortable truths about yourself.
Okay, let's unpack this. Goggins doesn't sugarcoat his past. He lays it all out there. A childhood marred by poverty and abuse. Imagine this. 6-year-old Goggins. His family's running a roller rink called Skateland. Seems almost right. But this wasn't your happy-go-lucky roller disco. Goggins describes his dad, Trunis, as this incredibly controlling and abusive figure.
Really?
We're talking casual violence, relentless verbal abuse, even a loaded gun kept under young David's pillow just to keep him in line.
Wow. It's a chilling example of how deeply early trauma can impact a child's sense of self and safety. And sadly, these experiences are more common than we'd like to believe.
It makes you wonder how anyone could come out of that environment without being completely broken. And for Goggins, the trauma wasn't confined to his home life. He and his mom eventually escaped, ending up in rural Brazil, Indiana.
Which Goggins describes as being starkly different from where they had lived before.
Yeah. He was one of the only black kids in town facing the kind of racism and prejudice that would make most people want to disappear.
And we have to remember, this wasn't just Goggins' reality. This was, and tragically in some places still is, a lived experience for many people of color. The isolation, the fear, the constant threat of violence, these leave invisible scars that can run incredibly deep.
You'd think those experiences would be enough to completely derail someone's life. But for Goggins, it became a catalyst for change, albeit a painful one.
And this is where his story takes a turn. He finds a glimmer of hope with his mom's fiancé, Wilmoth.
Wilmoth represents stability, a much-needed father figure, a chance for Goggins to finally breathe a little. But then,
Tragedy strikes again.
Wilmoth is murdered. Can you imagine the impact of that kind of loss on someone who's already endured so much? It would have been easy for Goggins to succumb to despair, to become a product of his environment.
And that's what makes his story so compelling. He could have easily given in, but instead he makes a choice. He refuses to let his past define him. And this is where we start to see the seeds of his can't hurt me philosophy take root.
And that's what's so powerful about Goggins' story. He doesn't just tell us to overcome our past.
Right.
He shows us in painstaking detail how he did it.
Yeah.
And it starts with this concept he calls the accountability mirror, which honestly sounds kind of terrifying.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart. Imagine covering your mirror with Post-it notes, but instead of motivational quotes, it's all the things you hate about yourself.
Oh, wow.
Your flaws, your failures, your deepest insecurities staring right back at you.
He basically put himself on blast, 24/7. No sugarcoating allowed, calling himself out for being overweight, for underachieving, for not living up to his potential. It sounds brutal, but
That's the point. Goggins argues that most of us go through life trying to avoid these uncomfortable truths about ourselves. We make excuses, we blame others, we stay comfortably numb. But Goggins, he chose to confront them head on.
so how does this accountability mirror actually work? Is it just about self-criticism?
It's about radical self-honesty and taking ownership. See, Goggins believes that we all have this incredible potential locked inside of us.
Yeah.
But it's buried under layers of fear, self-doubt, and limiting beliefs. The accountability mirror forces you to confront those layers, to acknowledge them so you can start breaking them down.
So it's like holding up a mirror to your soul, but instead of just glancing at the reflection, you're forced to really study it. Imperfections and all.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly uncomfortable, but it's also the first step towards real change. And this leads us to another one of Goggins' core principles, callousing the mind.
Here's where it gets really interesting. He takes this idea of physical calluses, those toughened layers of skin you get from hard work and friction.
Right.
He applies it to our minds.
Yeah. Think about it. When you repeatedly expose your hands to friction, they build up calluses, making them tougher and more resilient. Goggins believes we can do the same thing with our minds.
Okay.
By actively seeking out discomfort and pushing ourselves beyond our perceived limits, we build mental resilience.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection here. So instead of shying away from challenges, Goggins is saying we should run towards them.
Not just run towards them, embrace them. View them as opportunities to grow, to learn, to callous your mind against future setbacks.
It's like that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But Goggins takes it to a whole other level.
He doesn't just endure hardship, he seeks it out. Whether it's physical challenges like ultramarathons and Navy SEAL training, or mental challenges like facing his deepest fears, he's constantly pushing himself outside of his comfort zone.
And this is where Goggins' story can feel a bit intimidating for us. Most of us aren't trying to run 100 miles through Death Valley.
Right, and that's an important point. You don't have to become a Navy SEAL or an ultra athlete to apply Goggins' principles to your life. It's about finding your own version of the accountability mirror and callousing your mind in ways that resonate with you. Sorry to interrupt you guys. If you're enjoying this podcast, then don't forget to check out our official YouTube channel, Mini Books Podcast, and subscribe for more great podcasts like this one.
So what does that look like for the average person?
It's about identifying those areas where you're holding yourself back, those self-imposed limitations that are keeping you from reaching your full potential. And then it's about taking small, consistent steps to push past those limits.
So if I'm terrified of public speaking, I shouldn't just hide behind my PowerPoints.
Maybe you volunteer to present one slide next time. Or you join Toastmasters. The point is you lean into the discomfort, you build that mental callus.
This is starting to sound less like self-help and more like self-inflicted torture. Does Goggins ever take a break? Have a cheat day?
Well, he does have a fascinating take on setbacks and failures, which, trust me, even someone like Goggins experiences.
Okay, let's dive into that because that's something I think we can all relate to.
Yeah.
So this guy, who literally runs ultra marathons on broken legs, still has moments where things don't go according to plan.
It happens.
It's kind of reassuring, actually.
And it makes his perspective on failure so much more valuable. He doesn't just bounce back. He dissects those setbacks like a scientist trying to unlock a mystery.
You're talking about his after-action reports, right? He even does them for ultramarathon.
Oh, absolutely. Take the Ultraman World Championship. Goggins is in the lead, feeling great, when, bam, his bicycle tire blows out.
Oh, no.
He crashes, gets banged up, loses precious time.
I can only imagine.
For most of us, that would be the end of it. We'd chalk it up to bad luck and call it a day.
Right. But Goggins, being Goggins, he sees it as a learning opportunity.
Exactly. He analyzes his strategy, realizes he went out too fast, didn't pace himself properly. Instead of blaming the tire, the weather, or even bad luck, he focuses on what he could have done differently.
So even in the middle of one of the toughest races on the planet, he's already thinking about how to improve for next time.
Exactly. And this relentless self-analysis is key to his success. He doesn't see failure as defeat. He sees it as data, as feedback that he can use to refine his approach.
And this concept of after-action reports, that's not just for elite athletes, right?
Absolutely not. Think about a time you bombed a presentation at work, or maybe your latest project didn't go as planned.
Yeah.
Instead of beating yourself up or just trying to forget about it, what if you took a page from Goggins' playbook?
Have my own after-action report.
Exactly. Ask yourself, what went wrong? What could I have done differently? And most importantly, what did I learn from this experience?
It's like turning your failures into fuel for future success.
Precisely. And Goggins' story is full of examples of this. He fails to get into the Badwater 135 ultramarathon on his first attempt.
Oh, wow.
So what does he do? He enters another grueling ultramarathon, the Hurt 100, on just a few weeks' notice.
Which, for those of us who don't speak ultramarathon, is basically insane.
It's brutal, treacherous terrain, insane elevation changes. But Goggins sees it as an opportunity to prove himself, to test his limits even further. And of course, he finishes the race battling through exhaustion, hallucinations, all of it. He even earns a spot in the Badwater 135 the next year.
And he probably aced his after-action report for that one, too.
Oh, I'm sure of it. But then, just when you think Goggins has conquered every challenge life throws at him, he gets hit with a curveball. A serious heart condition.
Yeah, that part really got to me. Here's this guy who seems invincible, and he's diagnosed with a hole in his heart that's been there since birth. Talk about a punch to the gut.
It would have been understandable for him to give up, to finally accept his limits, but not Goggins.
Of course not.
He goes through multiple surgeries, completely revamps his training, and instead of wallowing in self-pity, he finds a way to be grateful for the experience.
Wow.
Think about that for a moment. Faced with a potentially life-altering condition, Goggins finds gratitude. He even incorporates new training methods like yoga and stretching to stay in top shape. It's another powerful example of his unwavering belief that we always have a choice in how we respond to adversity.
It's like he's saying, okay, life threw me a curveball, but I'm just going to adjust my swing.
Exactly, and that's what makes his story so inspiring. He's not superhuman.
Right.
He's human, just like the rest of us. He just made a conscious choice to push beyond his perceived limits and embrace the suck.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of David Goggins, what's the key takeaway for our listeners? What's the one thing we should all remember?
You are capable of far more than you think. Don't be afraid to push yourself outside of your comfort zone, to embrace those challenges that make you want to hide.
Embrace the suck, as Goggins would say.
Exactly. Remember the accountability mirror. Hold yourself accountable for your actions, your thoughts, your excuses.
Yeah.
And when you inevitably face setbacks, and you will, treat them as opportunities for growth. Analyze them, learn from them, and come back stronger.
So what's your cookie jar moment? What experience, no matter how big or small, can you draw strength from?
What's your 40%? And are you ready to tap into that untapped potential that lies within you?
That's something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and remember, you got this.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to dive into more book insights and key learnings, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Mini Books Podcast, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We're back every Sunday at 9 a.m. with new books and more to learn from. Until next time, take care, keep learning, and keep growing. Remember, this is Mini Books Podcast.